Hello and welcome back to Scandinavian Design 101. I'm Sanna.
I'm Andreas, and we are two Swedes, and as always, we love design. In this episode, we're talking about the amazing architect and designer Charlotte Perriand. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it because it's a bit difficult with the French.
Yeah.
But as a pioneer in the modernist movement, she designed a huge lot of legendary furniture. And during her long career as a designer, she transformed the traditional overcrowded homes into modern functional dwellings. Sadly, her name was for long hidden behind the patriarch Le Corbusier, for whom she worked and where she designed a classic range of tubular steel furniture nowadays produced by Casina.
Charlotte Perriand was born in 1903 in central Paris. As a child, she was hospitalized for an appendectomy, and this experience would influence her future career choice. She was fascinated by the sparsely furnished hospital ward with white walls because it differed completely from how most homes at the time were furnished. And when she returned home from the hospital, she cried because she didn't feel comfortable in her overly furnished home. And with this experience, she understood that she enjoyed the empty space. Charlotte's parents were tailors working for some of the big names in fashion. As a child, she was great at drawing and started to study furniture design at the school of the Central Union of Decorative Arts in Paris. One day in 1927, before she had turned 24 years old, she visited Le Corbusier's atelier. And Le Corbusier was the big name in modern architecture at the time. Charlotte proudly showed him some of her sketches, but his answer was simply, "We don't embroider cushions here." Rejected, she turned around, but before she left, she told him she was participating in the annual autumn saloon. Le Corbusier visited her project, The Bar in the Attic, which was inspired by her own apartment with straight, clean lines and modern materials like chrome metal.
Technology fascinated her, and as a result of this, she used a car headlight as a lamp in her own home. She also often wore a necklace with chrome-plated copper spheres resembling a ball bearing. This fascination could also be seen in the objects she designed. And one example is an extendable table in chrome-plated steel with a black rubber top, clearly inspired by the car industry. All of this impressed on Le Corbusier, who immediately hired her to work in the atelier. And her collaboration with Le Corbusier and his cousin Pierre Chonaret would go on for 10 years and mean a lot to Charlotte, who was responsible for interior design and furniture at the atelier. Charlotte and Pierre would somewhat later become a couple, something Le Corbusier didn't appreciate.
In 1928, she drew all interiors for the project Villa Savoir, a highly modern building constructed from reinforced concrete with large windows and whitewashed facade. A machine for living, according to Le Corbusier. He hadn't designed any furniture before Charlotte joined the atelier, so she was assigned to design furniture for all his modern buildings. As a starting point, she was giving sketches by him, showing different sitting positions, and his idea of the chair as a machine for sitting. She drew sketches, produced prototypes, and showed him the results. His short response was, "They're elegant." And let's take a look at some of the different models.
The furniture were presented to the public for the first time at the Autumn Saloon in Paris in 1929. In an open space with storage units working as room dividers, the chairs were standing like modern sculptures, possible to move around as desired. After the exhibition, it turned out to be close to impossible to mass-produce the innovative furniture due to a lack of interest among the French producers. The bike manufacturer Peugeot was offered a license but showed no interest whatsoever. But Le Corbusier didn't give up that easily. He often used bentwood furniture by Tonnet in his different projects and contacted the Austrian company offering them the license. Their response was much more positive, and soon they started producing some of the models. Only a small number were produced due to a lack of interest among the consumers and a way too high retail price. The furniture wouldn't become classics until much later, given model numbers starting with LC in 1959 by the gallery owner Heidi Weber. And nowadays they're produced by Casina and still named LC. And that's a bit ridiculous because it implies that they were designed by Le Corbusier alone, and that's definitely not the case.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
The stock market crash of 1929 was a turning point for Charlotte. The general optimism and belief in the future was suddenly lost and replaced by mass employment. Many architects started questioning if the industrial society really was the answer. Charlotte went to Savoie in the French Alps to find inspiration and also to find balance between body and soul. She was inspired by the mountains, went on long hikes and even mountain climbing tours. At this time, she lived in an attic apartment and was neighbor with the painter Fernand Léger, a close friend of hers. Very difficult with the names.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Inspired by his art and not least the nature around her, she began to design furniture with organic shapes and materials. In nature, nothing is coincidence. All is decided by the law of nature. With the same mindset, she let the technique and function decide the shape of her furniture.
And at the 1935 Brussels World's Fair, the Le Corbusier atelier showed Study for a Young Man, a home for both body and soul. Here, Charlotte exhibited a chair made from traditional materials like wood and straw, something completely different from the machine-looking steel furniture exhibited at the fall exhibition in 1928.
Yeah.
On a shelf in the study, one can find a small stamp with a sinister premonition, "The war is possible." Hitler had attained power in Germany 2 years earlier, and Charlotte was highly troubled, fearing a new world war was inevitable. And at the time, Perriand approached the French Communist Party, engaging herself in the fight against poverty and social injustices. In 1937, she participated in a household fair because she was interested in technology as a mean to make life better for the housewives. The other participants showed innovations, whilst Charlotte showed the monumental photomontage The Great Misery of Paris. And it criticized the bad city planning and the health hazardous zones overcrowded by poor and starving workers. And it was a cry for help. Disease, poverty, overcrowding and high infant mortality affected the whole Paris. And according to Charlotte, it was the architect's main mission to create practical and cheap housing for the entire population. Le Corbusier proposed that these areas should actually be torn down and replaced by huge residential complexes surrounded by parks and greenery. And Charlotte was in charge of designing the base module for this project. And it was a 14 square meter room. And even though the modules were very small, they included sliding doors and smart storage units, which helped to create an open, empty space. Her focus was set on convenience, but with the ability to hide away the necessities. And storage and flexible solutions were the key to solve this problem. The module would also be used in her later projects, for example, student dormitories, hotels, and like holiday homes.
Yeah. In 1936, the French left-wing government established statutory holiday vacation. This meant that 600,000 workers went for their first vacation. Like ever. Charlotte wanted every person to get a chance to enjoy recreation in nature. She developed another modular unit with sliding doors in wood standing on pillars. It was a simple and functional construction, easy to build and possible to transport without the use of heavy machinery. A much larger unit was also designed, a kind of barrel-shaped shelter inspired by a carousel with room for between 10 to 38 people. She also designed a wind shelter for skiers in aluminium and tubular steel. Tubular steel. It's very difficult. Tubular.
And at the Paris World's Fair in 1937, the works by Perriand could be found literally everywhere. And of course she contributed to the Le Corbusier pavilion, but she also did a large photo montage with Fernand Léger and a collaboration with a union of modern architects and some fellow communist architects. And it was during this time she left the Le Corbusier atelier. He thought she spent too much time with her communist friends, and they parted on far from good terms. At the World's Fair, the totalitarian architecture had its great breakthrough, and the German and Soviet pavilions were awarded. In a way, this was the end of modernism as a political movement, and the world faced much darker times.
In the spring of 1940, Charlotte was invited by a friend to go to Japan. The Second World War had already begun and France was in war with Nazi Germany. The future was indeed unsure for the French population and she accepted the invitation and got on a boat for Japan only 2 days before the Germans stormed into Paris. The difficult journey took 2.5 months, and when she got there, Japan still hadn't joined the war. Western designers were invited to the country to help develop the industries. She didn't want to expose them to cultural colonization, but help them to create their own modernism adapted to the Japanese lifestyle. Perriand traveled through the country and felt a connection to the Zen Buddhist traditions and the strive for simplicity. She realized that the stripped and simplified architecture was what the modernists in Europe always had searched for, but never really had managed to achieve. Standardization far surpassed the West, and the pure functionalism found in most Japanese homes outmatched the ones built by avant-garde architects in Europe. During this time, she also reinvented some of her furniture in traditional Japanese materials. One example was the resting chair produced from bamboo instead of metal. The time in Japan was a very rewarding time for her, but the war was closing in.
In December of 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and Charlotte had to leave the country for Indochina. And there she met and married a French marine officer in Hanoi, and together they got the daughter Pernette. They stayed in Indochina until the war ended in 1945 and returned to Paris in 1946. She was shocked to find her home country in ruins and homelessness was widespread. Now the architect had an even more important task to do, and the reconstruction gave modernism a new chance. Le Corbusier contacted Perriand and gave her a mission to design apartments in Marseille. It was going to be a large complex with room for 1,600 people. Her philosophy from her formerly designed small homes was again used with open spaces, sleeping lofts, sliding doors and smart storage. An open-spaced kitchen and living room was made to break the woman's isolation. And traditionally, women had been standing alone in the kitchen, cooking and doing the dishes, and open-plan flooring made her a part of the rest of the family. In 1950, Charlotte released a manifesto called The Art of Living, inspired by Japanese architecture and also by French peasant society. And the home should be functional, but also a place for relaxation adapted for its inhabitants. And here she criticized the homes designed by Le Corbusier, and they lacked humanity and were sterile creations not adapted for living.
In 1955, she held an exhibition in Tokyo where she exhibited furniture inspired by Japanese aesthetic, for example, the chair Ombra, a stackable chair which was an easy way to create open space, which was the most important thing.
Yeah.
Same with the low backrest, which made the chair invisible around the table.
Yeah.
Very small.
It's a small thing.
Yeah, it is.
At the end of the 50s, she collaborated with Jean Prouvé, creating metal storage units. And the shelves Tunis and Mexico was made for student dormitories and was the starting point for modular systems you could put together as you please. The customer could choose from a huge lot of different modules and put them together to a storage unit fully adapted for their personal needs.
So clever.
Yeah, and today that's something, I mean, we see everywhere,
Yeah.
but at the time it was something
Completely
completely new.
Yeah. In 1967, Charlotte was assigned to design a new ski resort, Les Arcs, in the French Alps, and the project would go on for around 20 years. The plan for the area and the large apartment complex was designed to blend in with the landscape as much as possible. Instead of small individual cottages, she designed a large complex possible to house the rising number of people longing for skiing holidays. She wanted all residents to have a beautiful view, so she made sure nothing would stand in the way of that. The apartments were small but well planned, like always, and had a distinct connection with the surrounding nature. Also in these apartments, the open kitchen and living area was central. The bathrooms were prefabricated modules to save time. Very smart. At the age of 86, she quit the project in 1989, and this would come to be her last large building project. She died in Paris at the age of 96 in 1999.
Yeah, and this was our introduction to Charlotte Perriand. And I hope you learned something new today about this amazing architect, and further on associate her and not just Le Corbusier with the classic furniture range by Cassina. Yeah. And if you like this video,
please click thumbs up.
Yeah, and subscribe. And you should follow us on Instagram. We're called Scandinavian Design 101.
I think they do already.
Yeah, they do.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks. That's all.